Pork ribs. Now I'm a sucker for some beautifully sweet, tender, smoky, savory pork ribs. And I'm a firm believer that the best way to get pork ribs is in a big offset smoker. But not everybody has a big offset smoker or a barbecue, or they live in an apartment that have nothing like that. So I'm also a firm believer that you can make delicious pork ribs in an oven. Now, it wouldn't be pork ribs without some accompaniments. So I'm gonna show you how to make some really nice Southern style cornbread, some delicious slaw, and we're gonna make our own barbecue sauce as well. And stick around to the end, because I'm also gonna show you my top tips and the best way to reheat these pork ribs the next day, because there's usually some left over. And this video is sponsored by me, but more on that in a sec. All right, first thing is we need to make a rub. Now, there is lots of really good rubs on the market, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with buying one of those and using it. I quite like to make it as well though, because then you can kind of change flavors, and this recipe will be below. Effectively, it's sugar, salt, and then spices. So I'm using smoked paprika, garlic powder, ground coriander, some mustard powder, which I think works really, really well with pork, and wattle seed. So wattle seed is a native Australian spice. So if you're not in Australia, you probably can't get access to it. It's got a really nice kind of, you know, coffee nutty flavor. I think it works really well in meat rubs. And last but not least, lots of fresh cracked black pepper. Now we're just gonna mix that up and then we'll get it on our ribs. All right, so these are our ribs, and these are what we call St. Louis ribs. And what we're gonna do is just pull the membrane off. And this is like an optional step. There's like a bit of a debate as to whether you need to do this or not. I don't think it hurts, because you're only gonna cook these for about 3 hours, so it's not a huge amount of time for this membrane to break down. I like to take the extra step and pull this off. You can also probably ask your butcher to do it if you wanted to. Just kind of work it down. You don't really need to use a knife. You can usually just pull it off. So St. Louis ribs over baby back. So what is a St. Louis rib? So all they've done with these is chop them off the belly section and taken the rind off, like off a pork belly. So you get, you know, a decent bit of meat there. Whereas baby back, they basically run their blade under this section here on top of the bone, and then they'll use that pork belly and sell that in some part and, you know, and something else in the shop. So the benefit is you have a much more meaty rib, which I'm a big fan of. The negative is that they're much more expensive. So baby backs will be a lot cheaper. These will take a little bit longer to cook as well, but let's get these all covered in some rub. So when you're rubbing meat, you actually want to pat it, not rub it. I don't know why they call it rub it. And you want a binder. So I'm using olive oil, works really well. You can use flavorless oil. You could use mustard if you want to. One clean hand, one porky hand. Clean hands for the oil and for the rub. Be pretty generous with the rub. Make sure you get it on all sides and pat it in. And make sure you're hitting the ends. Nice even coating. And that's it. Rinse and repeat with the rest. All right. We are gonna wrap our ribs. And the reason we do that is because it kind of creates like a convection oven almost, where they're kind of gonna steam in their own juices as they cook, which should make them juicier. So 2 layers of, not full layers, but you kind of want them just like overlapping of foil, just so that they're big enough to cover. What we're trying to do is trying to create a, you know, like a sealed chamber. Ribs in the center. And then I'm gonna bring these sides up so that we create a boat almost. And vinegar. This is coconut vinegar. White wine vinegar will work. White, just plain distilled white vinegar will work. Apple cider vinegar will work. Sherry vinegar, champagne vinegar. You get the point. Any vinegar will work. Little drizzle over. And then we'll wrap these up nice and tight. Do that with all our ribs, and then we'll get them in the oven. The oven's preheated. And it's on 160 degrees Celsius, or I think that's about 320 Fahrenheit. I reckon they're gonna take 3 hours, but we'll start checking them after 2.5 hours, which gives us plenty of time to get everything else ready. Hey Siri, set a timer for 2.5 hours.
2 hours and 30 minutes, starting now.
So I released a book. It's taken a huge amount of time and effort from an absolutely legendary team, but I couldn't be more proud. You guys have been asking for it, and it's taken ages because I wanted to make sure it's right. This book is all about bringing friends and family back to the table. So the chapters are broken down into share plates that you can choose a few different ones from, cook them, and then you can all sit down to the table and tuck in together. There's only 70 recipes, and there's even a breakfast section, dessert section, and a burgers and sandwiches section. Now, the pre-sale is super important to the success of this book, so go click the link below and make sure you secure your copy now. Thank you all so much. This is an absolute dream that this has come together, and I can't wait for you to get your copy. Now back to the ribs. All right, barbecue sauce. It's pretty easy. It's a bunch of ingredients in a pot and we'll cook it down. Most barbecue sauces have a base of ketchup, so that's what we're gonna use. To that, we're gonna add brown sugar, apple cider vinegar, maple syrup, Worcestershire sauce, liquid aminos or Maggi seasoning. Adds a really nice umami flavor. For salt, I'm using smoked salt because we don't have the luxury of a smoker. This is a great way to add a bit of extra smokiness to the sauce. Some garlic powder and some smoked paprika. All we're gonna do, get those combined, bring it up to a light simmer, take it off, and it's done. So this barbecue sauce, we will use it for glazing our ribs once we've got them nicely cooked, and we'll also serve it on the side with the ribs and all the other things. So for the cornbread, we've got cornmeal, and you want not a particularly coarse one, a kind of a fine one. Buttermilk, a couple of eggs, lard, baking powder, baking soda, salt. It's pretty simple. First things first, we'll get it, oh no, that's a slippery boy. First things first, we'll get our lard and put it in our skillet. Skillet on, and just on like a medium-low heat. At this point, all we're trying to do is melt that lard, not like really heat it up. So like most batters, dry ingredients, wet ingredients, add your wet to the dry. Bicarb soda or baking soda, it's the same thing. Half a teaspoon of baking powder, some salt, 1 teaspoon. Give that a little whisk, put that to a side. Buttermilk, eggs into your buttermilk. Then we're just gonna whisk our eggs into our buttermilk, and then we're gonna add our buttermilk to our cornmeal. It's also known as polenta, especially here in Australia. You probably won't find cornmeal in the supermarket, but you will find polenta. Give that a whisk. Okay, so we're gonna add half of our lard to the cornmeal batter, leave the other half in the pan and turn the heat up to sort of medium high. So we'll just whisk this lard into the batter. Back to our pan. Now I just want to see our oil or our lard shimmering. We'll get our batter in. We'll just flatten that out a bit. I turned the heat off because it started getting a little bit aggressive. But now I'm going to turn it back on to medium heat. Once that's just, you know, smooth-ish, I guess. Doesn't have to be perfect. And we've got some bubbles forming. We're going to shove it in the oven. So our oven's on 220 Celsius there, nice and hot, or I think that's about 450 Fahrenheit. We'll leave it in there for 20 minutes and then we'll come back and check. All right, ooh, looks pretty good. 20 minutes later, use the old toothpick method. Make sure that it comes out clean. We'll just let this rest here for 10 minutes before we take it out of the cast iron. All right, coleslaw. So there's two major types of coleslaw, like vinegar-based coleslaw or mayonnaise-based coleslaw. And I think it depends on what I'm eating it with as to what way I choose. So this way, we don't have heaps of creamy stuff going on, so I'm gonna use a mayonnaise one. But if we did have something like mac and cheese instead of the cornbread, I'd probably go for a vinegar-based. But to start, we're gonna make our dressings. We've got mayonnaise, some vinegar, 2 tablespoons, some mustard. So this is hot English mustard. You can use Dijon if you don't like it kind of too spicy. Now we're just gonna mix that through. And what that vinegar will do is loosen up that mayonnaise as well, which will make it easier to fold through our veggies once we've cut them up. Just a little season with salt, some pepper. Mix it together. So veggies, red cabbage, white cabbage, carrot, red onion, and curly parsley, the classic. So cabbage. Now, I like to use a mandolin. These things are sharp, be very careful, use the safety guide. You want some texture, but you don't want it, you know, super chunky. And you'll be surprised at how much it turns into once you start slicing it. So that's what I'm looking for. Nice bit of texture, not too fine, into our mayo. Red cabbage, about the same. I guess about, just a little bit under half a head. And it goes. So carrot, peel, mandolin. Then once you got your nice flat ribbons, I prefer to finish them with a knife. And in, red onion, nice and fine. Onions in, and all we need to do is just a little bit of parsley, some greenery, run your knife through it so it's relatively fine. The best way to mix this is with clean hands. And the reason why is because you can feel where the mayonnaise is going. And the trick that I kind of always say is try and keep your hands as free of mayonnaise as possible. And that way you know that the it's being absorbed into all the veggies. At a certain point, you're gonna have to get mayonnaise on your hands, but I think it's kind of a good rule of thumb to start with. Because the goal here is to have all those ingredients really well mixed together, and every single piece of carrot, cabbage, onion, parsley is nicely dressed with the dressing. Not overdressed, just nicely dressed. All right, time to serve. All right, it's been 2.5 hours. Let's see how these are going. They smell good, that's for sure. Ooh. So I'll just peel this back a bit. Oh yeah, baby. Oh. They are cooked beautifully. So you can see the meat's kind of pulling away, but it's not just mush. That's what we're looking for. So what we're gonna do now is turn our oven up to 200 Celsius, about 400 Fahrenheit. We're gonna take our ribs out of the foil, put them directly on the tray, and cover them in that barbecue sauce, and get them back in the oven for about 15 to 20 minutes, just to get them nice and glazed. What that's gonna do is just like caramelize up and get lots of that charry good color. 20 minutes later, and these are looking mighty fine. Just gotta plate these up pretty simply. We're gonna serve this family style, and as tempting as they look, you probably wanna let these rest for a few minutes, or you might regret it. All right, the good part, time to taste. Some of that cornbread, get some of the slaw, then what we've all been waiting for, some ribs. Oh. Bit of extra barbecue sauce. Oh wow. You know, for something that's all done in the kitchen in a matter of a few hours, that's pretty bloody good. Cornbread's good too. It's hearty, it holds together, it's not crumbly. Often you find your cornbread can be crumbly or it can be too dry. I think this is like a really nice happy medium, and it works well to mopping up some of those meat juices as well. If you've made too many ribs like I have today, cool them down in the fridge, and then tomorrow when you want to reheat them, put a little couple of pieces of butter on top, wrap them in foil and into a 140-degree oven for about 25 to 30 minutes, and they should still be just as delicious. Thanks for watching, legends. Like if you took anything from this video, subscribe if you're not, and don't forget that the cookbook is now on pre-sale and the link is down below in the description. We'll see you next week for another recipe. Push.